Hello everyone, time for another Wargaming update, and start by showing you these 18mm Eureka figures, Russian infantry for the Crimean War. So I've revived this old project of mine because I heard that Warlord were planning to bring out a Crimean War supplement for black powder. It's not likely to be for at least a year, I would imagine, but I thought I've already got the British Army more or less complete to my satisfaction, so I thought if I started on the Russians or revive the Russian army project, then in a year's time I might have a decent sized force to be able to play some of the scenarios in the supplement when they come out. So yeah, pretty happy with these ones. These last unit I've painted that you may have seen was with caps. These are with the Pickelhaube helmet, and the only other thing to say about this group really was that there were a lot of broken bayonets in them, so I put those mainly on two stands and put them in the back row there so that they don't stand out too much. But yeah, bit of a misfortune really with the bayonets. Not quite sure why this particular packet should have had so many breakages, I don't know, but haven't experienced that to such an extent with all my other figures that I've got from Eureka. Yeah, the other thing that I was going to say was that I have been doing a lot of painting, but you're probably not going to notice that so much in this this particular update. But basically what happened back in mid-September, I had a recurrence of my urinary retention problems and prostate problems, and ended up in casualty, having to have another catheter inserted into my bladder. I won't go into the grisly details too much, other than, you know, just to say that it's going to be in situ until the end of November. So I faced the prospect of 10 weeks where I couldn't really do very much in the way of outdoor activities. It's certainly, I mean, I'm a lot more comfortable than I was the first episode back in January. So I am able to get out and get to the shops and things like that, but it puts a kind of bit of an impediment on doing anything too strenuous, going too far, striding out, bending, stretching, all that kind of thing. So the observant among you will have noticed that there's not been any content on my channel recently in the way of expeditions to Dartmoor or flying my drone or going along the coast to film naval ships and so on. It's all been indoor stuff, and that's the reason for it. But in relation to this group of figures, what I thought I would do is, to make the time seem to pass a little bit more quickly, was to take on slightly bigger sort of chunks of projects. So I do paint very slowly, so it seemed to me the perfect solution to make the 10 weeks go quickly would be to see how much, you know, I could accomplish in that period. So the next group of Crimean War figures that I'm going to paint up, or I am painting at the moment, is double this size, and I've just I've just relaxed all my disciplines in terms of not taking on too much at one time. So I'm undertaking a lot of fairly ambitious projects and things that definitely won't get completed by the end of November now, but you know, have kept me occupied and kept me sort of engaged with the wargaming hobby. and you should see the fruits of that labour appearing in the next few months or so. So my Wargaming updates will change slightly, and that there won't be so many of these sort of penny packet videos where I just show you small amounts of painting, but with wide diversity of things. I'll be showing you more kind of bigger accomplishments as the months go by. Yeah, so that's enough on the subject of the Crimean War. Let's move on to the next thing that I've got painted up. Okay, and then continuing with my 15mm Pony Wars project, I painted up these figures from Alternative Armies. Now, some time ago now, I purchased quite a lot of made some sort of tentative purchases from quite a lot of 15mm ranges, that produce figures that were suitable for Pony Wars. And I bought these and just picked them out of my lead mountain to paint up, and not terribly impressed by them for a number of reasons. They're very clunky. They remind me a little bit of irregular miniatures in a way, quite kind of crude castings, lots of mould lines and flash on them. Not very well researched either, in terms of, for instance, the bridle and so on is very kind of, it's a Western style sort of horse harnesses and so on, and it's not what the Plains Indians would have employed. So I'm certainly not going to be getting any more of them. I'm not. They'll do as kind of fillers. I need a massive number of figures to play Pony Wars, so they're going to disappear into the hoard on the tabletop. But the other reason, even if they were good figures, I wouldn't be getting any more of them, is that it's very limited range. I mean, there's only one figure with a lance, one figure with a bow, excuse me, and an Indian chieftain, and that's it. So after, a couple of figures and slight variations in the way you paint the horses, there's not really a lot of variety in them either, so they're not suitable for large number of figures. So yeah, I won't be getting any more of the Native Americans, but I may well. It's a quite useful range for personalities and character figures and so on. So I'll show you some scouts that I bought from them, and I've got painted up as well next. Okay, so these two figures are scouts, identical figures, just painted slightly differently. Yeah, they're not bad figures. I wasn't too sure about the firearm. I think it's meant to be a kind of double-barreled shotgun, but on one of the castings, this one here, it's slightly damaged, so it looks more like a rifle. But yeah, they'll do as scouts. So they would work probably as buffalo hunters or something like that you need in the game as well. And as I say, Alternative Armies do quite a lot of civilians and various other characters, so I think it's going to be quite a useful range for that. But I'm definitely going to have to stick to Blue Moon for the bulk of the figures, because they seem to have the biggest and widest range out there in 15mm for this period. But yeah, Alternative Armies is probably going to be useful for some of the more peripheral kind of figures that I'm going to need. Okay, on to the next thing. Next up we have these figures from Castaway Arts. They are an Australian company, very useful ranges for all the colonial periods. They do other things as well. They do some ancients and so on, but they seem to specialise in, as I say, very wide range of figures for the colonial era, and these are all Berbers, which I intend to use in my Beaujesse kind of period project. The three that are now at the front, that all seem to be dressed fairly uniformly, are depicted in the sort of traditional North African tunics and so on, which is where the French picked up on the uniform for their zouaves, and then that got passed on to other armies such as the Americans in the Civil War and so on. But it was a traditional North African style of dress. But I decided what I would do with those three figures is to paint them in uniform colours, so that I could use them, rather than use them as Berbers, I could use them for the French side as sort of auxiliaries or something like that, goumiers or something like that, dismounted goumiers. So I'm not sure whether that is a fairly accurate portrayal of what the colours of the uniforms would have looked like, but I just thought I would give them French kind of style of colouring as well as the dress, and then they could be used as scouts or auxiliaries or whatever for the French Foreign Legion. But all the others are going to be dismounted Berbers for the Berber force. So I'm gradually getting there now with a Berber force to kind of equal my Tuareg force. All I've got to do now is paint up some figures that I purchased, dismounted Berbers that I've purchased from Empress, part of the 1898 range. And again, that's a similar thing where there's quite a lot of them, but I'm going to try and paint them all in one go, in one sort of big bite, as it were. So I've taken on a slightly more ambitious approach. Right, on to the next thing. And then finally, in the way of figure painting, finish this group of Ascaris. Just sort of selected them out of my lead mountain, really, with the aim eventually. I'm looking at recreating the Battle of Elbajet, which was a fight between a kind of column led by the German explorer Karl Peters and the Maasai. So I basically need quite a large amount of well, Karl Peters had a lot of Somalis in his force, so I'm not quite sure what their appearance would have been, so I decided I would use Ascaris. Yeah, not much more to say about them really, other than you know, that's coming along quite nicely and should have fairly sizable force. You know, what with all the other figures I've already got painted up for sort of Darkest Africa kind of period. Should be there fairly soon with that. Be able to try out this fairly old set of rules now. I think it's called In Deepest Africa by Chris Pears, but if they don't work or I'm not happy with them, there's plenty of other rules that I can employ instead. Right, next then, on to all my various purchases. Let's start with my DVD purchases then. So this I spotted, I think it was recommended to me by Amazon in the way they do. It's released recently. It's a Western called Old Henry, and it struck me it would make a quite good scenario for a Western game. It's not, you know, it's not a brilliant film, but it was worth watching. I enjoyed it. The plot, I'll read the synopsis to you, because there is, be careful if you buy this, because there is a very easily dropped spoiler, which unfortunately, because I read a few of the reviews before I purchased it, you know, there's always someone who can't resist giving away the sort of denouement of the plot and so on, and You do kind of guess it as the film's going on, but you know, it's better to watch the film for yourself and then have it revealed to you as the director intended, rather than, you know, because some twerp decides to let everyone know the spoiler, you know, in a review on Amazon. So I'm just going to read the synopsis to you and leave it at that. An action western about a farmer who takes in an injured man with a satchel of cash. When a posse come for the money, he must decide who to trust. Defending a siege, he reveals a gunslinging talent which calls into question his real identity. So that's basically the film. It's mainly a gunfight where this chap is besieged in his farm, but it's an ideal scenario for a war game, and yeah, worth watching. Next up, I picked up this very cheaply on eBay, as you can see, not too great in the way of packaging or presentation, but it was only £2.99. I thought I would get it. It's a DVD of the 1936 version of a novel called Under Two Flags, which was written by a female author called Ouida, who went by the name of Ouida. It's actually, Under Two Flags was actually written in 1867, but this version of this film version of her novel came out in 1936. For that reason, it's very reminiscent of the slightly later 1939 film of Beau Geste, and they do actually have that in mind, I think. Even though that film hadn't come out, they do have Beau Geste in mind, I'm sure, when they made this film. This particular version stars Ronald Colman and Claudette Colbert. It's set in the Foreign Legion, and it's sort of it's not sort of, it is an alteration to the original story. This film goes straight to North Africa, so there's no explanation really of how the central character, who's called Bertie Cecil, played by Ronald Colman, came to be in North Africa in the Foreign Legion. In the book, he doesn't join the Foreign Legion at all. He joins the Chasseurs d'Afrique, and half of the story really is about why he comes to have to leave England and join up under a nom de guerre, as it were in the forces of the French colonial powers in North Africa. So you can see a lot of similarities there, as I say, to the plot of Beau Geste. There's other similarities in the novel itself, as well. So I think P.C. Rand definitely had this book in mind to an extent when he wrote Beau Geste. But things like the central character is an aristocratic figure who leaves England for reasons of honour, but apparently for reasons of dishonour. He's a very kind of remarkable, capable figure, aristocratic, as I say, but quickly picks up things like the Arabic language and so on, and has got innate fighting skills and so on. So lots of similarities and things like that in the film. Again, not a brilliant film, especially as they do drop you right into the action in North Africa rather than really kind of revealing the plot to you. And the plot is quite well conceived and developed in the book. But yeah, some good battle scenes and so on, in black and white, obviously at that time. But some good battle scenes, and worth getting for £2.99. I'll stop going on about that. And the last DVD I got was, I can't remember when this film came out. It's not that old a film, but I've been looking out to get the DVD of it for quite a while, and it's not been available. But it finally, for some reason, every now and again I have a look on Amazon, and it was finally back in stock and available, so I got it. And I really, it didn't have a great critical acclaim, this film, but I really like this version of the depiction of the fight at the Alamo. It's far more authentic to my mind. I mean, a couple of things in it. Not many people appreciate really that the final assault on the Alamo it took place in the early hours of the morning, and in darkness. And most depictions of it you see, for the sake of photographic, depiction of it, and the Hollywood interest are in the attack takes place in daylight. So they do handle that quite well, being able to show you the spectacle of the battle while still depicting it as happening, in darkness mainly. I thought they did that very well. And the other thing was a lot of other things are far more authentic in it, I think, but the portrayal of Davy Crockett as far more of a kind of flawed hero rather than the all-American hero, that John Wayne depicted in one of the earlier versions of the fight at the Alamo. So he's even, they even have there's a version of the actual fight that David Crockett was taken prisoner and executed after the fight was over, executed as a prisoner, and that's how they choose to show his demise in this particular film. So I like it for all kinds of reasons. I think it's a very good film, and it did prompt me to think about maybe even wargaming the Alamo, but I'll talk about that a little bit more. I'll do that next, in fact. Yeah, as I said earlier, it's pretty obvious now that I'm going to have to rely on Blue Moon figures for my Pony Wars, Plains Wars project. So I made another purchase of some Plains Warriors, they describe them as, from Old Glory, mounted version packet and a dismounted packet, so that'll keep me going for a while. But while I was on their site, having watched the Alamo DVD, I thought I would purchase some 15mm figures suitable for the Alamo. So unfortunately they didn't have some of the bags that I ordered, so they should be arriving shortly. They had to wait for their next order from the US, but I did get hold of, I have had delivered so far, the Texican Personalities, which is who's in here, Sam Houston, Bowie, Austin, David Crockett I think is in there, and then a packet of command figures which are just generic officers and command and so on. Yeah, and I have had some files from my 3D printer of the Alamo buildings, which I've had in mind to print for quite a while. And as I say, because of this prolonged period of enforced stay-at-home kind of get on with my wargaming and not be able to get out very much, I just let myself go in terms of just buying things and saying, yeah, let's start it. And I did have my eye on some figures by a company called Boot Hill, which are really lovely 28mm figures for the Alamo. And they're still around, but they've been bought up by Brigade Games in the US, so you have to get them from the US now. And I was a bit concerned that a lot of the buildings that I've got files for wouldn't be, I would have to work on them in order to be able to print them up in 28mm. But if I print them up as 15mm, I'm going to be able to print them easily. So I think that's the way to go. But when I start on this project, I just don't know. I just let my enthusiasm run away with me. So for the moment, they're just going to be there, ready to take up. But I just allow myself now to indulge my imagination and my ambitions and wargaming kind of enthusiasms and so on. And that's what this was all about, really. It may be quite some time before you see any of these figures painted or that figure underway. So they are all the figures. So next up, I think all I've got to show you is books that I got hold of. Not much in the way of books, partly because I haven't been able to get out to browse in second-hand bookshops and so on. So this was just arrived today from my sister. She spotted this in a bookshop in some kind of museum she was in, and thought I might like it, and it's I said yes please. So she posted it to me and it arrived today. It's basically story of each chapter is written by a different author, the story of various naval battles, but the uniting kind of theme is that they're all battles that are commemorated in some way by paintings in the gun room at the Naval College at Dartmouth. So that's not necessarily paintings of battles such as this, but it might be paintings of personalities and commanders and so on. But such as that one, for instance. But it looks like it's going to be quite a good read. Always welcome new additions to my library anyway. And then finally, this book I got from Amazon, and really pleased to have got this, and I've read this now, and it's a delightful book. I think it's brilliant. It's by Ian Knight, who's better known for his studies of the Anglo-Zulu Wars, but he's kind of in recent years he's sort of been expanding his repertoire, as it were, to sort of periods of the 19th century, and this is really a description of the British Army in the early Victorian period, but he has to cover the story beginning kind of around the time of the Napoleonic Wars, and he carries it on to an extent to later colonial conflicts such as the Boer War, but principally he's concentrating on the period from when Queen Victoria came to the throne in 1837 up until the last conflict he actually describes in detail is the Indian Mutiny, but it's basically kind of 1837 to around 1860, and he chooses to select a particular theatre or a particular battle, but doesn't confine himself to that particular theatre or battle in the chapter. So he would talk about various things like recruitment, quartering, barrack life, discipline, all those kind of things, uniform changes, equipment changes, but he kind of uses the battles or the campaigns as the sort of nucleus of the chapters. So he starts off with a very curious choice, which is Bossenden Wood, which is a fight rather than a battle. I mean, some people have described it as a battle, so it would technically then it would have been the last battle fought on British soil, but it only involved about 100 people on each side, but it was a fight that took place just outside Canterbury in 1838. From the point of view of the parameters, the parameters of his book, it counts as the first death in fighting. It saw the first death in fighting of an officer during Queen Victoria's reign, so it kind of qualifies in that respect. but it's more interesting. I think that this is one of the nice things about his book, is that he looks at the fight. It was a fight between a local garrison in Canterbury and a party of malcontents and sort of farm workers and agricultural workers who had been stirred up by this charismatic character, and it led to the death of someone who originally went to arrest this character, and then they called out the troops, and there was this conflict in the countryside near Canterbury, as I say. But the interesting thing is that it wasn't, a kind of one-sided fight as you might expect. The agricultural workers put up a really strong resistance, and as I say, there were a number of fatalities amongst the British troops as well. And he uses that to sort of talk about the way the army was used to, a lot of the troops, never saw service abroad, but the British Army was used as a way of policing unrest, industrial unrest and social unrest in Britain. But also, he notes with interest that originally at the beginning of this period, the British Army much preferred to recruit from country, dwellers rather than the more sickly and kind of undernourished inhabitants of the city slums, and shows that they, one of the reasons was that they were really tough and, really able to, mix it in melee and so on. So it's part of where the British got that reputation for fierce, bayonet work and so on. Anyway, I really enjoyed this book. It's got a lot of things in here. It covers a lot of periods I'm interested in, such as the Crimean War, the Indian Mutiny, and so on. It's got a lot in here. I mean, I thought I knew, a lot of these subjects, and yet Ian Knight's still able to add, has added to my knowledge, as well as written in a very intelligent and thoughtful way about a great many different themes. To give you an example of some of the little factoids that I really liked and enjoyed, I had never realised that during the meeting between Napoleon and the Emperor Alexander at Tilsit on the River Niemen in 1807, I think it was, might have been 1809, forgive me, I've forgotten the date of it. Might be able to find a diagram of it here somewhere, remind me. But the British actually had a spy in the kind of underneath the raft, in the rafters, listening in on the conversation between the two emperors, which was extraordinary. But it was from that spy, he was a discontented Russian aristocrat, that the British initially got their paranoia about the Russian threat to their empire in India, because Napoleon was desperately trying to persuade Alexander to join him in a march on India, as it were. He had designs on the British Empire, and Alexander was all up for it. And that was really the genesis of the British fear of the Russians, and led to the whole, problems of what they were to do with Afghanistan and all that kind of thing. So I thought that was particularly interesting. But another little factoid that I had never realised, and I'd taken it as being history, and in fact it wasn't, was that when Napier conquered the Indian province of Sindh, he is supposed to have sent a telegraph, or maybe that's before or a message at any rate, that just had the single word Picavi, Latin word Picavi, which is the Latin for "I have sinned," and that was, that's often quoted in history books, and I think it was Havelock actually emulated it during the Indian Mutiny, when he sent a message saying Nunc fortunatus sum, which means I am in luck now, when he arrived in Lucknow as as part of the relieving efforts of the to raise the siege of Lucknow during the Indian Mutiny. But anyway, the whole thing. So he was obviously copying Napier's style and wit. This sort of Latin erudite, sort of Latin military message. But in fact, Napier never sent that message. It was actually written or suggested by a 14-year-old schoolgirl, Victorian schoolgirl, who wrote to the magazine Punch. But Punch thought, oh yeah, that's really clever, we'll use that. And they didn't attribute the girl, but they actually attributed it to Napier. But he never came up with that saying. So it just goes to show that that's been repeated in history book after history book, and it never actually happened. So I love that. But anyway, yeah, I can really recommend Warriors in Scarlet by Ian Knight. Very enjoyable read. It's got lots of interesting accounts of fighting on the Cape, in South Africa, in New Zealand against the Maoris, the Crimea, the Indian Mutiny, various other actions such as the Sikh Wars in India. Loved it. Really recommend it if you're into that period of history. And that, as I say, is my Wargaming update for mid-November. Next one is likely to be a little bit different, as it's probably going to revolve around one subject rather than all these different sort of penny packets. And I'm not sure when it will be, because I'm a long way off finishing any of said bigger chunks of wargaming projects. But anyway, I'll see you when I see you, and thanks very much for watching. Bye for now.